Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I'm pleased to moderate this session today, which is related to women, but also how much we can advance sustainable natural resources development, and also really excite all the participants who are online to what we're doing. So I will be starting first by asking each of you to present yourself, but not just say your name and where you're working, but also how did you get there, and what was the I would say the flame, the fire that came up at one point that said, hey, this is what I want to do. You may have done a few things in between, okay? So we'll start, I'll just go in order of my screen. Lesley, if you want to start.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's exciting to be part of the panel. I'm Dr. Lesley Warren. I'm a professor in civil and mineral engineering at the University of Toronto. I'm also the director of the Lassonde. My own research group, we are heavily involved in the application of genomics and metagenomics to inform new biologically smart strategies for mining waters and waste reclamation. So which is a huge jump from where I started. And it's trying to give a very short answer to how I got here. I'm the daughter of a sailor, and my father was in the Navy. We grew up all over the world, but always in contact with water. And when I went to university, I was the first one in my family to do so. And it was a course on lakes that suddenly made me realize, actually, we don't know everything, and we have big problems to solve. And that led me into geoscience, and in particular, it led me to a range of different open doors for me. And I think that's a critical piece that I would say to young people who are sort of thinking about what you want to do. Follow your passions. I certainly did. Take those opportunities. Sometimes they're scary, but you will never regret trying things. You regret sort of missing those opportunities. And it really led me to create a research program that has a variety of different disciplines and all kinds of smart young people involved. And we're trying to make a difference. We're trying to help an industry itself who knows it needs to pivot into a leadership role for sustainable development. And you do that by being open to new ideas and innovation. And incidentally, that's how you never work a day in your life. It's fun to do your job. And I'm just delighted to be part of this panel.
Great, thank you very much. You're right. It's a question of when we're passionate about what we're doing. It's not a job anymore. Thank you. Pamela?
Good afternoon. My name is Pamela O'Hara, and I'm VP of Sustainability for Fireweed Metals Corp. My path to the mining industry is varied, as I'm sure most of yours are. I have a undergraduate degree in biology and oceanography and a master's in environmental management. I've worked both in many sectors, I think, always in male-dominated industries, and have always taken opportunities as they've come to me. I've worked in mining, transportation, urban land development, as well as the forestry sectors. And, you know, my education allowed for me to have a diversity of background that enabled experience in all these sectors. I really love working in the mining industry because there are just so many opportunities, and every day is an adventure. So I also encourage folks to get into this sector because it is never boring.
Great. How did you get there? What was your click when you were young to go towards what you did?
I think always working or living in BC, my dad moved around a lot. He was in the school system, and so we always enjoyed nature. I started at UBC in a microbiology program and quickly evolved to a biology and oceanography program. I was fortunate enough to work for some tremendous scientists at Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Environment Canada, and Agriculture Canada in my university years. And I think I just grew to be very passionate about trying to affect change within industry, and felt I could do it more from the inside than the outside, working for government.
Great, thank you very much. The next I have is Brendan.
Hi, yeah, Brendan Macdonald, CEO of Fireweed Metals. It's an honor and privilege to be here. You know, I got my start quite early in the industry. My family lived in Yukon Territory, Canada, and worked in mining exploration. So you can count my first job in mining perhaps when I was 15, when I started soil sampling and staking claims, or it might have been when I was 2 or 3 years old, where my dad would drag me into camps with him. Where I would generally cause chaos and not all 2 and 3-year-old do. Nonetheless, you know, I started university, and I initially started studying a combined chemistry and biology, thinking I might do chemistry or I might do medicine. But I kept working in the summers in mining exploration, and just, you know, that love of outdoors. And certainly when you work in exploration, you're spending your summer in camps and flying around in helicopters and landing on mountaintops. At its best, it's absolutely unbeatable. At its worst, it's when the weather's bad, and it can be not so pleasant. But you know, it was such an amazing experience for me, and it encouraged me to switch into geology. That led to some time as an exploration geologist. I did an MBA over in England, spent some time as an investment banker focused on mining and metals. Did not like being an investment banker, so came back to industry 3 years later and have been plying my trade since. So, you know, proud to be part of the Fireweed team since its inception, and you know, really enjoying working in an industry that's you know, laggard for sure, but the pace of change now is so quick that it's really great to be part of that transitional moment in an industry where it hopefully emerges soon as a real modern full-thinking industry.
This is great. Yeah, thanks. Always different ways to get into what we want. Daniella?
Definitely a theme that is progressing here as the different twists and turns that have brought us all to this industry. Similar to everybody else on this panel, I'm very thrilled to be here, and similar to everybody else, I've taken some different paths to get here. I started out my career headed to law school, and I got a Bachelor in Arts from Western University in French and German. Haven't really used much of the German since then, but you know, I was on a career path to become a lawyer. I got my law degree from University of Windsor, and after practicing law for about 6 years, I joined one of the clients that I was doing a lot of work for in financial services industry. And I spent about 8 years in the financial services industry, initially in a general counsel role, which is what I had gone to school for, and then transitioned into corporate development, and ultimately spent a lot of time in operations, and became the chief operating officer of a Canadian national financial services firm. And when the financial crisis hit in 2008, I ended up pivoting. And someone asked me to take on a role in the mining industry, and I said, you know, I don't know anything about mining. I'm financial services. I'm operating now, and so on. And due to what was happening in the economy, I really fell into it. I fell into the mining industry, and I've been in it for the last 13 years. I've held different roles in the mining industry, from legal to governance to corporate development to investment banker, similar to Brandon, and have been the CFO and CEO, and at times the CFO and the CEO of different miners in this space. I have to say that the mining industry and what I have taken away from it is one, the ability to really make a contribution and the ability to really drive contribution to society, and a lot of the things that we look around and in our current lives have their origins in mining and metals, really. And secondly, and we've heard from each of the speakers, is really that nothing is forever in our careers. I went back to school. I got my as well. I've been a lawyer. I've been a CEO. I've been a CFO. I've been a COO. And I think the one thing, when we look at particularly the last 3 years, and what I've tried to take away from my career that I want to share with the participants today, is developing capabilities. So resilience, adaptability, flexibility. When we look at the last 3 years, we've dealt with a pandemic, global supply chain disruptions, climate events that we haven't seen maybe ever. And nobody has a playbook for the things that we have had to deal with. And looking at your career as a toolbox, you're developing capabilities and you're taking away learnings from each of your experiences and adding to your toolbox will allow you to be able to pivot, to be able to pursue those opportunities as they come forward, even if you don't know when you come right out of school what it is that you're passionate about or what you want to do, in your career. So.
Great. Yeah, it's true. You never know what can happen. One thing that this session is about is also women, and I would say probably even underrepresented other groups as well. Often it's a question of trying to see how to balance that, how to make sure that there's a better inclusion, and also probably looking at how having a more equitable, diverse company, or especially in the mining, but in any type of natural resource development, to make it more sustainable. How to really encourage those that are participants who are probably women or coming from other minorities. What do you think is the first key to help them getting there? I don't know who wants to start with that. Probably Brendan. You want to start?
Sure.
Or Daniella? Okay.
Yeah, I can say something quickly. I think in terms of demographics and of the mining industry, we're undoubtedly a male-dominant industry, and we're also an old industry, right? That's the other thing to remember. As we like to say, certainly in Canada, we tend to be male, pale, and stale, and that makes it highlights the importance of that diversity and that need to attract diverse people into the industry, but also highlight the challenge, which that when people look at the industry, if they don't see themselves reflected in it, they tend not to find it attractive. And it's the wicked problem of fixing this is you need the role models and the reflections and the examples to encourage people to join, and which I think is starting to happen. And I think we have some excellent examples here.
Great. Thank you very much. Daniella?
Yeah, as an industry, we've got to be deliberate about it. And the conversation around diversity and inclusion has certainly increased in the last number of years. I've been in the industry for about 13 years. I cannot say that it's been easy, that it's been an easy industry to be in, but I have seen the change that has taken place. And to Brandon's point, we're looking at a talent gap in the industry with a retiring workforce. So we've got to become more competitive on attracting all around talent and with a deliberate focus on diversity and inclusion. And in terms of how the talent looks at the industry, I think that acknowledging that there is a difference in how different people look at careers and at progression. And the one thing that really stuck with me through my career, I've had mentors that have actually pushed me into roles where I didn't feel that I had all of the experiences and all of the skill sets, and that I didn't check the boxes, and probably was looking at it as having to check, 150% of the boxes. Is that when someone offers you an opportunity and you don't feel that you're checking all of the boxes, go for it anyways, and figure it out as you go along on how to do that. And so how we look at talent and attract talent to the industry has to be more deliberate, number one. And number two, for talent that are listening in on this panel, go for it. Put up your hand and go for it. This is a dynamic industry. It is in transition. There are lots of opportunities for growth, lots of opportunities for participation and contribution.
Great, yes, and you're right. Open the doors, as we say. I have Lesley and then Pamela.
Yeah, I wanted to add, I think too, the competencies the industry is looking for right now are really different than those who might not have thought about mining. I run into this a lot. People think about mining as a dirty industry, you're digging up rocks. And to a certain degree, that's true, but it's amazing innovation that's happening in that space around smart mining. But if you look at the grand challenges around environment, sustainability, sort of how do we build inclusivity so that stakeholders, First Nations, Indigenous peoples are included in partnership and development, this really speaks to a different kind of person that the industry needs to bring in. And the grand challenges that the industry is facing are going to be critical to the entire global sort of planetary capability to come up with sustainable development. And so I think the opportunities to affect change for massive disruption are really here. And to Brandon's point, you have this perfect storm of big changes in who's sort of controlling mining. Stakeholders and shareholders are looking for green sort of strategies. What are your environmental enclosure practice? What are your social license? How are you going to engage? How do you engage with stakeholders in your communities? All of this speaks to a massive change happening in terms of operations and decision making, and particularly value proposition for this industry. And this idea of talent. Value is no longer just the dollars that you return to your shareholders. Value is in fact more about what are you doing for the environment that will actually leave it in a better state than what you found it in, and what are you doing for the communities that you're working with. And I think that really is exciting. If you're someone who wants to make a change, who believes in sustainable development and the need for that change, this is an industry that is ripe for that kind of mindset to come in. And I think the idea that human capital comes in all shapes and sizes and colors. We know that. You want the best and the brightest around the table. So I think really give it a go, because I'm a woman and I've sat around the table with a lot of the pale, male, and stale that Brandon referred to, but you don't see that as much anymore. And we see this reflected in universities. Canada is a mosaic. We need that to be represented in our industries too. And there are a lot of champions within the industry that firmly believe this as well, that we need to open the door to innovation, which requires inclusivity of everybody and different ideas and different competencies at the table.
Great, yeah, it's true. And it's known that in fact, more you have a diverse group, more you have ideas that are coming at different angles and usually lead to a lot of new innovations as well. Yeah, Pamela?
Yeah, some really good points here. And I started in the mining industry in 1994 during the diamonds rush. And you look at what's happening today about, well, first of all, I think environment is defined differently today, whether you define it as sustainability or not, but it's both the physical environment and the human environment. And they're mutually inclusive now. And it is a very exciting time, I think, in the mining cycle, or in the last couple of decades, to be back in the mining sector again. I go in and out of seemingly, you know, mining and transportation are the two dominant industries I work in. And so, you know, again, my skill set's transferable. I think, you know, getting a biology degree or geology degree, you know, I think that part of the perception of mining, at least, you know, for those in a program now, an undergrad or graduate degree, is that you have to have this specific skill set in order to be successful in this industry. And you don't. There are so many opportunities out there once you start getting out in the workforce. And I would say one of the greatest things that I love about my job is I've had the opportunity to travel both within Canada and internationally. And if you like to travel, if you like to see new environments, work in new environments, and enjoy diversity, mining industry has everything that you could possibly hope for.
This is true, yeah. And learning from other places is amazing also, in terms of you find always new ways, and you bring also new vision of things that can be done and all that. So that's also an advantage. Traveling is really getting you to open to the world at the same time. Yeah, Brendan?
Yeah, I was just gonna, you know, you mentioned learning from elsewhere. I was just recalling a conversation I had last week with a larger mining company who had operations around the world. And actually they're closest to gender parity in Africa. You would think, you know, we like to think in the West that we're the tip of the spear and the leading edge in this sort of thing, but maybe not necessarily, right? And I think there's that valuable lesson about, okay, so what's working there and what's not working at home, right? So that necessity to learn from other cultures and you know, learn from that successes is definitely there.
Yeah, I think it's a question of how to make sure that EDI is part of the business itself, the core of the business, that it's really embraced by everybody. It's interesting you said that, because I work in China, and I remember when they were building one of our new parts, there were as many women as men in the building industry there. It's not something that you, like here, we have our time to keep women in the building industry and construction. But it's not the case there. It's normal to have women, you know, pouring the cement the same way than the men. So how do we make it possible that it stays in the core of all industry for decision making, especially, but also because of innovation? And we know very well, especially with the idea of net zero emission for the mining industry, that will become something that will need to advance in terms of innovation as well. Pamela?
I mean, I think it's upon all of us to communicate and express opportunities that the mining industry has. We have to break the stereotypes here in Canada with respect to, you know, where, let's say, an Indigenous fellow versus woman will enter into the workforce. And I mean, I'll just bring an example. From this spring, we went into one of our local First Nation communities and had what we coined a meet and greet, because we wanted it to be very informal. And, you know, we had a lot of young women walking in thinking they could only work in the kitchen or only work in camp services. And we were advertising, no, like, if you enjoy math, if you want to do something different, we can get you more along the pathway of the geological side. And we think it'll provide you greater appreciation of what there is to offer in the mining industry and opportunities for your future. But it was amazing how that concept hadn't even been thought of before, that they could break out of that traditional sort of work placement.
That's a good point. It's a question of getting used to see other things. Lesley?
Just make sure I unmute myself. I think it's critical that this is an active initiative. And I think, we've seen this in universities trying to attract women and other underrepresented groups into STEM. We're still not there. So I think, it has to be active. I think we have to find partners to work with, organizations that are looking to build those pipelines, and we have to meet them where they want to be met. And I think that's also very much that Western mindset. We have to sort of park our egos at the door, is something we commonly say at the Institute. Listen to other groups, look for ways that they're interested in partnering, has to be transparent. You have to look for ways that have metrics of success that might be defined by those groups, not by the mining company or the sector. But I think the critical thing is that value is incorporated from the top down. It's core to the DNA of that organization and that sector, and that you're actively looking always to improve and iterate and work with partners and allies to keep building that talent pipeline. It's not a flash in the pan.
Yeah, it's interesting because that reminded me when at the time we had the conference of the Canadian Coalition of Women in Engineering, Science, Trade, and Technology, and we had the CEO of Via Rail, and it has increased in terms of the leadership of the company significantly, the number of women. And as he said that each time that they had the position, the people who had to be on the search committee had to find a minimum of 50% women. And if they didn't have that, said, go back, I know that there are talents there. It's a question of finding in some cases. And I like when Daniella, you said, I didn't have everything, but they gave me the opportunities. And I think this is what we have to make sure, is that people get this opportunity.
I think to build on that and the comment about being deliberate and to your point, how we frame position descriptions, what kind of capabilities we look for when we look for talent, and how we describe that. If we continue to describe it in the same way that we have been, then we're going to create those situations where talent is going to look at that and say, I don't check all the boxes. And so being broader in looking for talent and thinking about, instead of looking for 15 years of underground mining experience, if you're looking for, let's say, a general manager, how you describe the scope of the roles that you're looking for. And then on the other side is actually encouraging talent and making sure that talent is going to be set up for success. And what I mean by that is that means you really need to know your talent in the workforce. You need to stay close to them, and you need to encourage them. I was I had just taken over as the CEO of a junior mining company with 3 mines, and a position was becoming available. The chief geologist at 2 of the mines was retiring, and the second person within that team was a really, really talented young geologist, a female, in Spain. And we thought she'd just be absolutely perfect for the role, and really pushed her to put her hand up to pursue this opportunity. And we opened the opportunity for recruiting as well. But we really, really worked on the confidence and the courage, and in putting in place a process and ultimately an environment to set her up for success. She did put her hand up, she did get the role, and she did a spectacular job at it. But we had to be deliberate, we had to work hard, we had to put in place a process and a system, which for a junior miner, you don't have all the resources in the world, you don't have all the HR and the training in the world out there to do that, but it is certainly doable, but you've got to be deliberate about it.
Right. Do you think also it's a question of mentorship to make sure that when you see somebody with a possibility that like you said, this young junior person, to give them the opportunity to do something like that.
Absolutely. It's creating opportunities. It's managing the stakeholders. In creating those opportunities, you may have union members or leaders that might not see a certain type of workforce or a certain type of leadership or a certain type of or a certain individual in certain roles. And so you got to, again, you've got to work at also bringing the stakeholders along and demonstrating ultimately that having women as a chief geologist or in charge of the plant or driving trucks or a general manager of a mining operation, that is something that ultimately they should get behind and really promote. And that takes a lot of work and a commitment to achieve that. And you've got to have that commitment, because ultimately you're missing half of the talent pool if we're not going to turn our minds to it and be a lot more deliberate about it.
Good point. Yeah. Brendan, you had your hands up. Oh, no. Okay. No, and I think it's a question also. Do we have? And I'm thinking when you were talking, is do we do a good job in when we describe a new position that is open? And the reason I say that is I remember when we started advertising for our new department in engineering, and the first thing they ask is to me is, can you check if we have the right vocabulary, that we have the right terms, that is going to not bias? And interestingly enough, they can be a lot. Like even saying, for example, strong person, automatically it leads to the woman to say, oh, well, I'm not capable. So there are some words that we have to be very careful in advertising a position, for example. So I think, Brendan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and this time I'll unmute myself because I started talking last time, and so for first party foul of a virtual event. I think what you're saying is so important, being conscious of biases and explicit about things. The challenge for everyone, and certainly the men who are in management, is acknowledging that we have biases, that we all do, and that our brain takes shortcuts to save time, but that we have to work consciously to overcome those biases. We all want to surround ourselves with people, not consciously, subconsciously, we lean towards people who are like us, and this creates in-group biases and creates problems around that. And the first step is to be aware of, like, okay, so I have these biases. That's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it's like, that's the way the brain works, right? So let me be explicit about how I want to hire, who I want to hire, and how do I out-system our own biases, right? And that helps create, more equitable hiring, because otherwise it tends to be done from the hip, where we all just lean towards a little bit towards people who are a little bit like us, who fit the perceived mold, right? So it's, as a middle-aged man, it's never pleasant to become aware of your own biases, and you're like, oh my goodness, particularly when you reflect upon your past experiences, and you're like, when someone's explaining something to you and you're like, yeah, no, I've definitely done that, and you're not aware of what you've done, right? So just creating a more deliberate process is so powerful in undoing that.
It's interesting. The federal government has the training for unconscious bias, and there's a very good tool, Claire, that you can use that was created in the United States, but is quite appropriate because there are little things that sometimes we don't even realize that we are doing without knowing. So that's often what's happening. We have a couple of questions from the audience, so I'll read the first one. The first one is, what talents stand you in your industries that would get a person noticed in your industry? How do young people tell what is the most important check boxes to have?
Thanks. You know, I think it's not so much approaching things from a checkbox. I've hired probably my best staff over my career because they were keen. You know, they had the right educational background. They weren't in any industry. I remember one of my absolutely beloved staff members. I mean, she was an executive assistant in the film industry and had a biology degree. And I thought, oh, great, perfect. You can go to site, you can coordinate helicopter time, you can look after all these technical specialists we're sending site. Anyway, she was absolutely wonderful. I've hired people with the right, again, scholastic background of environmental engineering that they weren't given any opportunities before they came with their resume to me. And, you know, they were a nanny at the time. Anyways, they're still working in the mining industry. So I think it's enthusiasm, it's a willingness to do whatever it takes. The other really amazing thing about the mining industry, you know, there's so much going on at a site, whether you're in exploration or actually an operating mine. It's teamwork, and I've been successful because of, you know, having allies. You know, Brandon, you know, says that male, pale, and stale, or whatever terminology you could use, but you know, some of those male experienced senior leaders in companies can also be an ally for females to be involved. And it hasn't been easy at time, obviously, being a female in male dominated industries, but again, I think, as Lesley said, it's important to take any opportunity that comes your way. So I wouldn't look at it as a checkbox per se. Figure out, does this company fit the culture that I want to live within or work within?
That's a good point. The values that we have are important in this as well, and how to reflect them. I think, Lesley, you wanted to respond?
Just wanted to add, I think, you know, when you look at the breadth of skills in the mining industry, right, from exploration geology through to getting a mine permitted, to building it, to financing it, to operating it, to cleaning it up, you know, it's almost any competency you might have, and I would translate to what you find interesting is absolutely going to be relatable to mining in some aspect across that life cycle. And increasingly, I think people who can think across potentially disciplines and across, you know, maybe you are able to combine finance with sustainability or life cycle assessment, that kind of ability, that bigger thinking where you're connecting things, I think is going to be increasingly important. And that there are places in companies that are early adopters really looking to change the game, because so much of mining is based on science and knowledge discoveries that we're currently in the process of making. So anyone who's got that bent for, you know, understanding knowledge discoveries and how to do that, interested in innovation and startups, all of that comes to play in mining as we move forward, because the mining that was, and even the mining that currently is going to have to be very different in the next sort of decade to really deal with sort of the energy transition, climate change, and creating a sustainable industry that isn't going to destroy the planet in the process. And so, you know, I think if you're interested at all of the perks of this industry are coupled to it a massive value add by having people with different competencies come in.
Yeah, and you're true. Yeah, it's completely true. And I remember when I was at Laurentian University and on the board of SEMI, that you know, we started talking not just in terms of the mining, but more the AI, all the three-dimensional aspects of digital exploration. It's a completely different world. Computer scientists can be part of it, as well as the reclamation. So that means ecologists, biologists, and chemists, to be able to see how it works. It's a completely different world than people sometimes think about. We have another question. it's should there be training for mentors? Surely it is important to do so well. If it is a skill, it would benefit from training. Should mentoring be part of KPI? And finally, tongue in cheek, why is it called mentoring as compared to woman touring? Don't know who wants to start talking about mentoring. Brendan?
Yeah, look, absolutely, there should be training for it. And I would think, you know, the most important thing is when you're young, or I mean, really doesn't have to stop, is to seek out mentors. And when you're experiencing your career, to never forget that you were mentored, because everyone was. Nobody succeeds in a vacuum. And to be established and not turn around and give back, I think is a major failing of character. And I, you know, yes, I think KPIs in large companies, making mentoring explicit certainly would be good. And I think training on that, but I think in smaller companies, just having people understand that it is necessary for them to give back, and that the best way to get the most out of your people is to enable them through training and mentoring, right? And when they perform at their best, you perform at your best.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's true. Daniella?
Yeah, and I would say for the young people is to really focus on building your network, and your network doesn't just have to be, you know, from this industry. Think about maybe establishing, you know, almost like your own board of advisors that you can turn to, and that you can reach out to and talk about your career, talk about things that you're you know, working toward or working through professional life on that, and really keep that going. And one of the when I went back to do my executive MBA, in one of the classes, we were told to provide a list of 10 people that we did not know, and we were not told why that was. And so, you know, I came up with basically CEOs of banks and mining companies, large mining companies. And ultimately the assignment was to try and reach and track down that person and ask them to help you with your assignment. And my assignment was, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. And I actually had, they picked one of the 10 people. One of the 10 people was the CEO of a very large mining company. And I was supposed to now work through my network to try and get a few minutes of that person's time. And I did. And it was an assignment that really, you know, gave me a much better understanding that if you do reach out to somebody in the industry, that they will likely give you that 5 minutes. All you need to do is actually have the courage, and it was an assignment about courage, to make the ask. And that really stuck with me on that, and, you know, through my career, to say, can I have 5 minutes? And equally to give somebody 5 minutes of my time, if I can help in any other, in any way. So have the courage to ask as the talent, and make the time for the talent.
Great. Yeah, I think it's a great message to all the audience, all the people, because it's to keep continuing to try to get these contacts and getting to people. That's the best way. We learn so much from talking to people. Lesley?
I just wanted to add, because I saw the next question, which was about useful or helpful groups for sort of women who might be interested in getting involved. So there is Women in Mining, and there's national, provincial, and international sectors for that. I also want to mention the Femina Collective, which is a relatively new mentoring group that was initiated by Beth Borody, who is the VP Sustainability at New Gold. And it's about women in the natural resources sector, those interested in getting into it, those who are already in it, those who are peripheral but might have skills to develop community to help women succeed. And I'm a mentor in that group, and I think many of us, and I think the point's been made, we're all here because other people have opened doors for us and helped, and in many ways. And I think there's an expression, my previous dean, who happened to be a woman at the University of Toronto in engineering, you know, success floats all boats. And so when women succeed individually, we succeed collectively, and more importantly, we succeed essentially for an industry and as a nation. And so there are institutions and initiatives out there for mentoring. And I think it's as much about anything of developing a community where you can be heard, where you can calibrate your thoughts and your experiences and have feedback about whether or not that's accurate, what you're being sort of told or reflected back at you is actually true, and how you might navigate that. So I highly recommend checking out the Femina Collective, but as well as Women in Mining, PDAC. There are a number of mining sector agencies that are starting to look systemically at EDI and how to build that. So the timing is right for anyone who might be interested.
Yeah, I think it's important. And also there's the question of even within campuses. In many cases, we'll have the WISE program, we'll have groups that can help. I'm hoping gradually Brock will get towards that. And many universities are part of the coalition CCUS. There are a lot of tools. There's WinSet, which is more the training center for that. So there are places, I think, to really, what Daniella said, take the courage to be able to ask and to really reach people. It's interesting because I know that in my case, two important mentors were men, and but they were very good at pushing and knowing and telling me where to go and how to do it. So it's not necessarily just, and sometimes I think we mix the role models versus the mentors as well. And you need both, but they are probably not necessarily the same person at that point. So yeah, the next with the useful groups. So we started answering that. So what do you think in terms of women can change the world of sustainable development, natural resource development? If you have, because I know we have only 2 minutes, probably each of you, if you can put one action that you think can help, that women are very good at, that can help the mining industry to move forward. So who wants to start quickly? Leslie, do you want to start?
Sure. You know, I think women are team players. They're highly effective communicators, and they can work across multiple silos, right? So multidisciplinarity in women is something we do extremely well, and those are all critical skill sets.
Great. Who wants to go next? I'll go, Pamela.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I'll say 2 words: multitaskers and collaborators.
Great, thanks. Brendan?
I would think women tend to be a little bit better at the introspection that, men suffer from or lack of because of how competitive we are raised to be, right? And I think a good team definitely has, competitive spirit, right? But breaking out of that and collaborating is critical.
Right. Daniella?
Communication, listening, and actually hearing. Really important skill sets, particularly for the work that we do in communities and the continuation of social development, the consultation and the actual listening and delivering programs based on that is really important.
Great, yeah. Yeah, and I think one thing that, especially in the era of social media and all that, is to get out a little bit on the social media, to be able to communicate person to person, and that develop the contacts, and that point the possible opportunities that are coming from that. I think that's something probably important, especially having the young university, college students often not necessarily used to do that because of the texting. It's easier than to meet people in person. So it's probably a change of money that needs to be done too. Yeah. But I would like to thank you all for being a part of this wonderful panel. I really enjoy your comments. I'm hoping that it's inspiring for the attendees, because really the idea of collaboration, communication, contacts, opportunities, I always say keep the doors open. This is, I think, pretty much a good message coming, and that there's not one path, there are many paths to get to the mining industry, to get to different components of it in some way.